first we're going to cover automated license plate readers. And Ms. Christensen, I believe, is going to give us a presentation. And then that will be followed by Chief Jeff Potts from Bloomington. Welcome to the commission. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the tape, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Stacy Christensen. I'm the Director of the Data Praxis Office in the Department of Administration. And I think this is much less of a presentation and more of an update, just kind of how the automatic license plate reader biennial audits from the department's perspective have just kind of what has been happening. So just kind of a brief reminder for folks that maybe need a reminder. The license plate reader legislation went into effect in 2015, which included an audit requirement. As part of that audit requirement, independent biennial audits on the technology needed to be completed beginning in August, on August 1st of 2017, and the Commissioner of Administration has the obligation to review those audits. So in terms of kind of what the Commissioner is looking at and just kind of based on a lot of the questions that we are receiving from the law enforcement community, we developed the information page that you all should have in your packets that gives kind of the background and kind of what the checklist might be for what would need to be within that audit. So that's kind of what folks have been basing them off of. There is not a requirement to notify the Department of Administration if you're using the technology, but there is a requirement to notify the BCA. So we've been working off the list that the BCA maintains on their website as to who has this particular technology, and then kind of tracking it that way. We have received, or there are 45 agencies that are on that list who've reported to the BCA, and we've received 6 reports that have been reviewed and are all in compliance. I did receive 3 more this morning, so a total of 9. So the reports that we've received so far are from the Duluth Police Department, the Golden Valley Police Department, the Richfield Police Department, the Shakopee Police Department, South St. Paul, and West St. Paul. And then this morning I received reports from Crystal, Brooklyn Center, and Robbinsdale. Based on the statute, there isn't a way to kind of track when those reports in each particular agency might come due. It's based on when they start using the program. So we'll just receive them as we receive them. So that is basically all I have.
Member questions? So what you're saying is because they've gotten these this technology at different times, then the audits are due at different times. Basically, we're allowing them some time to get up to speed and actually have something to be audited.
Yep, Madam Chair, that's correct.
I've gotten a few of those copies myself, and I've been kind of amazed that really all I've received is sort of an executive summary saying, yeah, they're all in compliance. There really aren't any specific numbers as far as, I think there was one report, it might have been Shakopee, that said, yeah, we had, we used it this many times, we had this many hits, and those sorts of things. But I was kind of underwhelmed by the amount of information that was really in there in the audit, and maybe that's something that we need to get a little more specific on on how we want the reports to be sent to us. When the Department of Administration is reviewing the audits or the reports, are you seeing more information than what I'm actually getting? No, that's all you're getting too?
Yes, Madam Chair. So the statute just says the Commissioner has to review the reports summarizing the results. So we're seeing everything that you're seeing as well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for your testimony.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Madam Chair, I
Oh,
have a question.
yep. Yeah. Go ahead, Senator.
Ms. Christensen, back when the license plate reader was being passed in the legislature, the equipment was already in use by at least the Minneapolis Police Department. There might have been other police entities that did that. At that time, the major issue that surrounded license plate readers was, what do you do with the non-subject data, and how many days do you maintain that? if memory serves me correctly, it might be 90 days?
60 days.
60, okay. And can you tell me, how is that information after 60 days, how is it disposed of? Is there any record that is kept by your agency, or is it all disposed of in some manner?
Ms. Christensen?
Madam Chair, Senator Limmer, I don't know the answer to that question. We don't have any data that's provided to us related to the disposal of the
I
data.
think that's probably a question for our next testifier. Mr. Potts is shaking his head.
Okay.
And so
All
I
right.
think that's a question for law enforcement. Right. All right, any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Christensen. All right, Chief Potts. Welcome to the commission, and thanks for being here. Thanks for what you do.
Thanks, Madam
And-
Chair.
Yeah.
I brought with me one of our commanders that oversees our investigative division that can help with the presentation here. Her name is Kim Clausen, and
Okay.
we have a few slides to go through.
All right.
And then stand for any questions you might have after that. And
Is
I
that
think,
Clausen with the C?
CLAUSON.
All right. Very good.
I think the presentation may answer the senator's question as we go through.
Perfect. Go ahead.
So as was already mentioned, we have a slide that just shows you the number of agencies in the state that are using LPR. This is directly from the BCA's website, just as was mentioned by Ms. Christensen. Just a quick little background from the city of Bloomington and how we're using LPR, and a little bit of background. We've with program, our LPR program was first proposed in 2012. We funded our program almost entirely through state and federal grants, the state grant being basically an auto theft prevention grant, and we have also used some federal grants in how we've developed the program since then. We're currently operating 5 mobile systems, that is that they're on 5 squad cars. Each squad car that has an LPR system has 4 cameras, 2 that point forward in opposite directions and 2 that point to the rear in opposite directions. They run on Sprint Air Cards. Funding for our program this past year came by way of the Auto Theft Prevention Grant. That was able to bring us 1 additional mobile unit.
Mr. Potts, real quickly.
Yes.
What was the amount of that grant? What's it costing to run this program?
That annual grant was $18,700, and a system for a mobile unit is approximately,
That's the cost for the one mobile system is $18,700 was the estimated price from the vendor, and that was what we were awarded.
Okay. But that's just one, and you have 5.
we have 5 mobile units, and I'll get to the other
Okay,
systems that we
sure.
have here in just a couple of slides.
Sorry.
Madam Chair. Primarily, what we've seen with LPR, although there's several databases that the BCA manages that the license plates are run against, we see our biggest kind of day-to-day benefit of the system in recovering stolen vehicles. As you can see, in 2015, there were 8 recoveries at Mall of America, where we have some stationary units mounted. In 2016, that rose to 21 auto theft recoveries, 14 of those by the LPR systems that are permanently or stationary fixed at Mall of America, and another 7 auto theft stolen autos recovered on those mobile units. So far in 2017, we've seen that increase so far this year. I think this is data through November 1st, roughly. There's 20 stolen vehicles recovered through the use of the stationary units at Mall of America, and another 4 with the mobile units. And from a cost standpoint, or from a return on that grant dollar investment, you see there's quite a return just in the area of recovering stolen autos. There are other investigative uses for the license plate reader system. It expands the investigative capabilities. We talked at great length back in 2015 about one of our cases here where we had a spree of crimes along Normandale Boulevard. It was the LPR system that helped us. It was instrumental in helping us solve that case. It helps us identify possible suspects, which is exactly what it did in that case that we highlighted back in 2015. Important point to note here, it rules out innocent people. We find it very valuable in ruling out people that we may have heard or may have included as on our list of suspects. Provides evidence to bolster prosecutions. It's helpful in locating shootings and homicide suspects. Votive is a violent offender task force. If they are working on an investigation where they're aware of a license plate, that LPR system can be helpful in locating folks that they're looking for. and of course, as I've already mentioned, recovering stolen vehicles. So far, this is the data for requesting our data, our read data in furtherance of an investigation. So the vehicles that we scan are sitting in a server, and where they can become valuable to an investigation is when a detective working in our agency or someone working on a legitimate law enforcement purpose from another agency makes a formal request to us. You can see the volume of requests that we've gotten over the last 2+ years, 15. We had 51, 2016, it went up to 111, and so far this year we've had 81 requests to look at the read data. As you recall, back in 2015, we passed some legislation. You all passed some legislation regarding the use of license plate readers. That is that is the point in time when the retention period for the data was set at 60 days. There were qualifications based and limits on information sharing. It required a log of the use of the system. As was mentioned previously, it required biannual audits of the use of the LPR systems, authorization to access the data internally. The chief law enforcement officer or a designee would have to authorize the access to the data. That was a part of the law. And also, as was mentioned, each agency is required to notify the BCA that they are using LPR. And if they're using it in a stationary capacity, they're required to notify the BCA of the location of the stationary unit.
Chief Potts?
Yes.
If you could go to the previous slide. I wasn't clear on who's requesting the read data. What, I missed part of that. I think I was writing something
Sure.
down.
Madam Chair, that would be where an investigator from our agencies that is working on a case, and they have a suspect vehicle, for example, with a license plate. They would go to the person that I've designated to manage the program and ask, in this case, Commander Clausen, I'm working on a burglary investigation, for example. I have a suspect vehicle with a plate of, 123 XYZ. Can you search the LPR database to see if we've read that plate?
Okay.
Commander Clausen would then go to the database and search by specific.
Okay, thank you.
This slide just quickly outlines what was required back in the 2015 legislation for the use of LPR. And just to highlight the biannual audit, as was mentioned, it's an independent audit, meaning it's outside of the agency. The costs, we have contracted with the same firm that does our financing audits for the city of Bloomington, and they are charging in that range, between 5, and they estimate it because these audits are not something that have been done before, and so it's the first time for most of these auditing firms or the folks that are doing these audits, and so it's a little bit of a range there. The audit involves, obviously, the independent auditing group coming in and working with the system. Ours has taken a little bit of time just because they weren't familiar with the software, and there's quite a bit of pieces of this audit to conduct, and so we're in the late stages of that. Our interpretation, I think, in consultation with the Department of Admin, was that we're auditing data through July 31st. Starting in August 1st is when the audit began, and we were under contract at that point in time to complete that audit. Our initial findings from the auditing firm are that our audit is clean. We're waiting on a final draft of that, at which time we will then file with the Department of Admin as we're required to by law. The auditing firm works with our IS department, our investigators, our dispatch, who are kind of on the front end when there's a hit. The dispatchers are involved. Of course, our clerical unit and our radio technician, who really is one of the key persons in terms of installing and managing the LPR software and hardware. Madam Chair, that completes our presentation. We'll stand for any questions if you have any.
Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony, Chief Potts. Chief, I have two questions. One relates to your decisions of how you deploy these. Bloomington's in a different position than a lot of other cities would be, just based on the traffic that you have through the Mall of America. So you've dedicated, I can't remember if you said 4 out of 7 or 3 out of 7, or how many there were, to the mall as stationary units. Is that correct?
Potts.
Madam Chair, Representative Lesh, We have 5 mobile, and how many stationary? I'll defer to Commander Clausen on the exact number of camera systems at Mall of America.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Representative Lesh, we currently have 16 stationary cameras operating at the Mall of America. They're covering all the inbound lanes of traffic into the mall and some of the outbound lanes.
Okay.
Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, over 75% of your stationary, which I'm assuming you get more bang for the buck there, which makes sense. But this relates to a second question I have, and this is not, I guess, part of the audit requirements. However, when we were passing this, I expressed reservations about the disparate impact that the decisions about deployments of these units would have on certain groups. For this reason, I know that having prosecuted for St. Paul for 15 years, I know where the squads are generally during the day in the Western District, the Central District, East District. And I know that they're not in the white areas of town. They go to where they receive the calls, and they receive the calls in neighborhoods, which I assume this is also true and to a certain extent in Bloomington as well, where there is a higher percentage of people of color. That makes me question the disparate impact of how these units are being used. Because you can say, well, hang on a second, we've got rules that apply to everyone the same way. We're not targeting people of color, but I can tell you that I suspect that as a matter of practice, there will be more people of color that police departments are collecting data on than there are folks who aren't people of color. And that is a disparate impact, which the Supreme Court has stated is an issue. Whether you intended to do it or not, it's a disparate impact. In your decisions about how to deploy these units, have you taken any of that into consideration when you decide how to deploy them, whether they're mobile units or stationary units?
Chief Potts.
Madam Chair, Representative Lesh, so as you can see on the slide here, with 5 mobile units in the city of Bloomington, here's what drives our decision on where those mobile units are deployed. We have 5 patrol areas from east to west, from north to south. We try and put these in our, what we call the area cars, and so we're having cars equipped with license plate reader equipment deployed citywide. The caveat would be if we had, for example, a string of crimes like we did when I talked about this in 2015, where we had a bunch of crimes happening along Normandale Boulevard. Somebody was throwing objects out of a vehicle. To us, it made sense that we would deploy our LPR cars who have a patrol responsibility in close proximity to where those crimes are occurring. Sole reason is to try to capture, hopefully, suspect information at times near to when these crimes are being occurred. And so that would be the only change in deploying these cars citywide. We have 5 patrol areas in the entire city. We try and have LPR cars out in all those area cars. We'll change that decision is if there's a string. Doesn't happen all that often, fortunately, in Bloomington, but that would drive the decision to, at times, temporarily use our LPR resources in an area to capture more, hopefully, information that might help us solve that crime. That doesn't happen very often. Like I said, we like to have these vehicles deployed citywide. Not in certain areas based on demographics, but across the entire city from east to west.
Representative Lesh.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that answer, Chief Potts. And I know that decisions, I don't know of a single police department that would make a decision of, well, I guess I should qualify that. I don't know of police departments in this state that make decisions on how to deploy either resources, be they cameras or squads or whatever, based on demographics, but they do get deployed based on responses, and sometimes that can aggregate to a disparate impact. So, and that may not be the situation that Bloomington finds itself in now, but I wanted to say, Madam Chair, that I will have that question of other law enforcement officers who testify today and in the future on this too, because for me, it's an ongoing concern. So thank you for your answer, Chief Potts.
I had a couple questions. Initially, when you got your first set of LPR you did it kind of in conjunction, well, you got the grants, and then you did that kind of in conjunction with Mall of America, or you deployed them there? Is that right? Am I tracking that?
Madam Chair, the first LPR systems that we implemented were through an auto theft prevention grant, and they were on squad cars. It was about the third year that we were the recipient of a federal grant, Homeland Security grant, through Homeland Security. And it was at that time when we decided to implement stationary units at Mall of America through that grant. So
Okay.
it was the second phase, I guess, if you will, for our LPR program.
Okay, and is it true that Mall of America talked about purchasing those from your department, and did that ever happen?
Madam Chair, to my recollection, there was no discussion about them purchasing. What it required is, because the Mall of America is private property, required a memorandum of understanding for the use of the system, and that memorandum of understanding still exists, but the city of Bloomington is the sole owner and user of the LPR system installed at Mall of America.
Okay, so if you have 16 stationary units out there, do they have their own people that operate that system out there, or is that done by your department?
Madam Chair, that's done exclusively by our department.
Okay, all right, thank you. And do you have, do any of your LPR have, reading some of these technologies and how they're advancing the cameras and so forth, are any of your LPR equipped with facial recognition technology?
Madam Chair, the LPR system, by its nature, does not have facial recognition features attached to it, nor does it have the capability of the cameras take pictures of license plates. Now, there are times when the view of the license plate may have some kind of periphery areas where you might be able to see people, but there's nothing attached to the system, nor does the system have the capability to do facial recognition or anything other than convert that picture into letters and numbers as it relates to the license plate on the vehicle.
Okay. Because I've heard that some of them not only have that capability, but also the ability to kind of do a 360-degree look around wherever that plate happens to be.
Madam Chair, I'm not aware of that capability with our system. I'm not sure if the commander here has that.
Madam Chair, our cameras are a fixed focal point, and they're aimed directly at the traffic lanes to catch the vehicle license plates.
Thank you. Any other, Senator Limmer?
Thank you. Chief Potts, I'm trying to reason with myself of why would you put a license plate reader at a private institution like the Mall of America as opposed to Highway 494, which may have 100,000 plus cars going through it, and I don't think even on Black Friday you'd have that many cars coming through the Mall of America. Why is that such an important location for you to install a license plate reader there?
Chief Potts?
Madam Chair, Senator Limmer, the decision was made basically in our efforts to do what we can to protect the Mall of America, as obviously it's a location within the state of Minnesota that gets wide attention in terms of the number of people that go there. From a tourism standpoint, I think it's north of 40 million people per year on that one location. And so when we looked at the tools available to help protect that facility or that location, we felt that LPR would provide us with the capability that we didn't currently have. Now, keep in mind, the BCA manages a database of that consists of, I think, 13 different kinds of databases, including stolen vehicles, hot files, I guess we call them, one of which is a terrorist database. And so we felt like the LPR system gave us a capability that we didn't currently have. You mentioned why wouldn't we put that on 494? Well, the capabilities of the system and the speeds at which you can use it at, the speeds at 494 probably don't allow you to do that in a consistent manner. And so we felt like it made more sense for us to use those dollars to focus a little bit more exclusively at that piece of property. And we don't, because of, some of the hot lists consist of like driving after revocation, people without a license. We don't have that turned on from Mall of America. We've selected certain databases that we feel were appropriate for the use at Mall of America, and those are the only ones we access with those stationary systems.
Am I
Senator Lamb.
am I to conclude that at the Mall of America, license plate readers are used for general surveillance and not specifically looking for a particular subject?
Chief Potts?
Madam Chair, Senator Limmer, as was mentioned previously in the presentation, the only access to the database where the license plate reads are kept would be in connection to a specific investigation where a license plate of a suspect. So in terms of general surveillance, a lawful use of the system wouldn't allow you to just use it to surveil individuals for idle curiosity reasons, or it's in a log. Every read, every time we look at the database, it's logged, and the reason for the inquiry is also logged. That's a big part of the annual audit. I think what that does, Senator Limmer, is it all but eliminates the use of the system for surveillance purposes, but rather solving crimes.
And one last question. How do you dispose of the background information that you can only hold for 60 days? Where does that information go?
Chief Potts?
Madam Chair, Senator Limmer, I'm going to take a attempt at this, and I'll have Commander Costin clarify here. But as the way I understand the system is, like many other kinds of system, the data is essentially deleted on the 61st day, and it's a rolling 60-day period of time. And so every night the clock ticks on the 61st day, it's then recorded over by the next day. That data is now gone. We don't have access to it. On that 60th day, that is the last day that we will have the ability to access that read data. On the 61st day, it is gone.
So it's not maintained by a hard drive at all?
It's my Madam Chair, it's my understanding that that data is deleted on the 61st day. Could you confirm that?
Yeah.
Ms. Clausen?
Madam Chair and Senator Limmer, the data is purged through the software. It's set up with our information system employees to purge that data on the 60th day, and it was confirmed through our audit that that is being done, and it's being done accurately.
Okay. Madam Chair, the reason why I'm asking some of these more technical questions is that certain members of the legislature have been trying to get a better understanding of law enforcement in general has as far as resources of electronic tools. And even though some of us have attempted to put that into legislation, that we get an inventory of the tools that law enforcement has so that we can make appropriate policy decisions that would govern the use of that equipment, we haven't passed that yet. And as a result, we don't always know what law enforcement has right now. And so when we do have an opportunity to have law enforcement talk about specifics on electronic data collection, it's our one and only chance to ask these questions. So don't take it personally, but we're just kind of trying to understand all of the resource that law enforcement has. And once we knew that, whether or not we need to react as a legislature for appropriate policy.
Chief, do you contract with a third party for any of the services with the LPR? Or is that strictly internal?
Madam Chair, we have a contract with one vendor so far. A single vendor helps with the purchase. They're the provider of ours, and the servicer of that is a local vendor, and only one vendor.
And do they, when the data that you're collecting now, is that cloud-based storage for those 60 days? How is that kept?
Madam Chair, that is on a server, hardware computer server in the city of Bloomington.
Okay. And so the third party, the vendor that you contract with, they don't have access to that server?
Madam Chair, they have access only when they're working at the city of Bloomington on our behalf, helping us, fix things that go down from time to time as we add equipment and as we replace equipment. They would have access, supervised access at that time, but only at that time.
And I know you can't speak specifically to what other agencies are doing, but is that, in your experience, is that kind of modus operandi that most agencies operate as you do? They don't contract with a third party to store the information for them?
Madam Chair, I'll defer to Commander Clausen on that one because quite
Okay.
frankly, I'm not sure.
Commander Clausen?
Yeah, Madam Chair, that is my understanding, is most agencies that I've talked to, they operate the same way. A lot of them use the same vendor, and the vendors are very aware that we consider this to be our own data that we can't share with others, and so that is a selling point for those vendors, that they don't have access to it.
Okay. And one final question would be, are you sharing that data with any other, with the BCA, for instance? Is that any of the information that you're collecting being sent to be part of another database?
Madam Chair, not in a kind of bulk kind of way. This slide would show you it's an individual request for read data from either investigators or sworn staff from our department pursuant to an investigation that they're working on, or another law enforcement agency pursuant to an investigation that they're working on. And we have to enter that into a log, and that's the only sharing of the data that we're currently conducting. That is in line with the current statute.
Right. Okay, thank you. Representative Lucero?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. In regards to your particular implementation of the software, it's on a server, as you mentioned, on your premises. How do you manage the backups then? So the backups and then the purging on the 61st day or redundancy of that server?
Chief Potts?
Madam Chair and Representative, I'll defer to Commander Clausen for that one.
Commander Clausen?
Madam Chair, Representative, I'm sorry, I can't see you, Luciano. Working with IS through this audit recently, I learned a couple of the answers. It is very technical, and so our IS department handles the settings in the server for the purge and the backup. And so they have set the server to purge the data at 60 days, and they also manage the backup, which they went through with the auditor recently within the last few months and have confirmed that it's set to the right settings.
Oh, you're good? Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, for being here. Oh, wait. Representative Lesh.
Question. Madam Chair, can we have researchers, someone remind us, what's the penalty if they don't do that? What's the remedy in the legislation? Does anyone remember? Because I can't remember. We passed this a few years ago.
Mr. Diebel or Ms. Pontius?
If they don't do that, I mean,
Suspension of the program, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Representative Lesh, excuse me. Am I on or not?
Yeah,
Okay,
you are.
sorry. I mean, there'd be the general remedies under the Data Practices Act for damages. Intentional violations are a misdemeanor. I think I'd have to look at the body cam statute. I think there was something special in there for vendors.
so just to be clear, an intentional violation is a misdemeanor. If you can show, if there's I don't know, an email that says, yes, do not purchase at 60 days, then someone actually can go to jail for that? And if so, who would do it? Would it be the person who sent the email?
Ms. Pontius?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Lesh, yeah, it would be whoever violated the statute. I mean, I think there's only been maybe one or two cases over the years where there's actually been a prosecution.
Well, okay, Madam Chair, in reality, we're not going to find an email like that, I assume, so it would be negligent, therefore there'd be a civil suit. So would it be the same kind of remedies that we saw under violations with the DNR guy who was looking up every licenses, which is, what, $1,000 a crack or something? Or $10,000? 10,000?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Lesh, some of that was federal law, too.
Okay.
So there, I mean, there are some penalties, civil penalties and remedies under data practices, but they're just kind of the generic ones.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, thank you for your time.